Welcome to TV on TV. We're back after a bit of a break for the new year. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. I hope you were able to see we've even got a brand new intro to the show. Exciting stuff. And thank you to Felice Vitolo for helping me with the animation. We got a great show. We've got District Attorney Michael Morrissey, who's going to talk about all of the ways in which his office, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, is working to improve the criminal justice system in the ways that he can do so. We're talking about outstanding warrants. We're talking about preserving the juvenile courts access in Brookline. We're talking about diversion instead of jailing, things like that. Really great stuff. Can't wait to have that conversation. But first, as always, it's the news. Today is January 6th, which makes it the one-year anniversary of last year's January 6th, when an attack on the U.S. Capitol was a serious thing. And I still struggle to think about the right words. It was traitorous. It was sedition. And so the Justice Department continues their investigation. Prosecutors have compiled nearly 14,000 hours of footage detailing the sequence of events and have made over 700 arrests. And it's estimated that as many as 2,500 people who participated may eventually be charged with federal crimes. This week, Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of blood testing company Theranos, was convicted on 4 charges of fraud for lying about the capabilities of her blood testing technology. Housing costs continue to rise in Massachusetts, with the median price of a single-family home rising 27.4% in the last 2 years. Now, here in Brookline, only about 10% of the homes are single-family homes. The vast majority are multifamily. But still, it's an indicator of price increases across the board. It turns out that measuring the price of single-family homes is much, much more precise than other buildings, where it can be less clear how many homes are in the building. Think about like big apartment buildings and how sometimes they cut units up and so forth. Earlier this week, the Massachusetts Legislature's Joint Committee on Education heard H 714, an act relative to universal school meals. It's an act that would provide every student with school breakfast and lunch at no cost and without registration, in the same way that students are able to get toilet paper or library books or tissues. They should be able to get breakfast and lunch. That's my view, and that's why I support the bill and testified in favor of the bill. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu continues to work to provide housing for over 150 people residing in the Mass and Cass temp encampments. She now explores the possibility of creating a recovery center on Long Island for those who also suffer from poor mental health and substance abuse. I have no doubt that will be a long journey to reopen the Long Island Center, if it is able ultimately to be reopened at all. But work worth doing. As Omicron cases continue to surge, with a peak expected in the next week or so, Massachusetts reported 16,621 new confirmed coronavirus cases and 28,651 vaccinations, including booster shots, just 2 days ago. Positive cases have led to staffing shortages in many sectors, including transportation and education. In fact, on Monday of this week, Brookline Public Schools closed for a lack of staffing. Additionally, the Brookline Public Libraries were closed, although I don't know if that was due to staffing or more general COVID concerns. Students did return to school on Tuesday with additional COVID-19 protocols, and that information is available on Town of Brookline websites that are linked to directly from the main site. And so I don't want to waste any more time with the news. I want to get into this great interview that I recorded just a bit earlier this week with District Attorney Michael Morrissey. As always, thanks for watching, and stay tuned. And hey, we're on big, Brookline Interactive Group. See you on the flip side. And as promised, today's guest is Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey, on Zoom, of course. Michael, thanks for coming on the show today.
Well, we've been trying to get together for a while, and I think it's probably my fault. I had a cold last time, and I'm just going through the vestiges of the COVID protocol now. Hopefully I'll be surviving and back to work full time. So Zoom works for me pretty well right now while I'm stay at home in quarantine. Everybody's running away from me. So, but I did want to, it's funny, you and I want to talk about the status of what was happening in the court system, and really what was happening when we first started talking about this in December has completely turned upside down again in the first week in January.
Well, we'll get into it, Michael. Thanks for coming on the show. I hope your family's well, and I hope that you progress through COVID with minimal symptoms and good health. But you're right. I do want to start by talking about the juvenile court. Some of our viewers will know that in Brookline Village, right across from the public library, is a Norfolk County courthouse. And one of the things it handles is juvenile cases. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that part of the county court system and what we've been through in the last couple of months thinking about it.
Well, I think a juvenile court is really an important gateway for young people, particularly that have a problem, that find themselves potentially on the other side of the law. And not that we're looking to get people a criminal record, but looking for a gateway to services. And Brookline is very fortunate in my mind. It's the only community in Norfolk County that has its own district court. Everybody else is serviced by more than one county, one community. Like, for instance, Quincy District Court services Quincy, Braintree, Weymouth, Cohasset, Milton, and Randolph. And so the types and kinds of crimes and what you see in those various different communities in Quincy are a lot broader and different than actually what you see going on in Brookline. And I think that full well, because you were the leaders of the legislative delegation that helped us save the juvenile session when they started talking about not having a session and providing services in Brookline. And basically we all hit the roof and put a good coalition of people together, and you organized the members of the legislature and beat up the judiciary, which was important. And we're able to at least save the vestige of services. Now, I'm not going to suggest to you that you have a landslide of a domestic juvenile cases that happen in Brookline. You don't, but you do have some serious cases, and getting to Dedham is not the easiest place to get to, especially from Brookline. I mean, it would take you a half an hour if you didn't have a car. I mean, there's no direct public transportation. You'd have to take the Green Line and hope you can get a commuter rail. And it just for kids, families that maybe don't have some of the resources, Brookline is easy to get to. It's a great place to have services, and the people that are there are very caring individuals. So I think I just want to make sure that I thank you and the legislators and the delegation for the work they did to help us save that. And we send a message to the juvenile court is that, sure, it's convenient for you, but it's not all about you. It's all about the people that need the services. And in many cases, we're seeing people from the neighboring communities that committed crimes or incidents in Brookline. And Brookline is a much more convenient place to do business. And so I just want to thank you for your hard work on that. And we'll keep it going in the future.
Well, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Actually, viewers, it was DA Morris who called me and said, "Hey, this is about to go down, and this is going to have a really bad impact on children and families in Brookline." So, Michael, thank you for flagging it and for really helping make sure that that we kept these kids and these families as our number one priority.
And no, I just lit the fuse. You took off, you know what I mean? And you got the selectmen involved, you got the senators involved, the other legislators, and the forced the judiciary to listen. It was a stupid idea in the first place. And it doesn't cost them. The building is there. They have the personnel. It just, it makes all the sense in the world. And, it wasn't about them. You recognize it's about helping kids. And so it worked out. I expect that we'll probably have fights with them in the future. So they got a taste of the fact that we're not going to back down, and we're going to continue to fight that battle to provide services for the people in Brookline.
Well, and so we got them to agree to continue holding cases in person, juvenile cases in the Brookline courthouse. But with the resurgence of Omicron COVID, where are we now?
Well, I think maybe that's a bigger question for the overall court system. When you and I first talked about, we had talked to people in general during the heyday of COVID. We were one of 3 counties that was not able to have in-person sessions or trials for the longest period of time because the courthouses in Norfolk County are generally, their size, their shape, their air quality was not sufficient to allow us to participate and have in-person venues. We were able to keep the grand jury up and running. And then finally, as it subsided, we were able to, in the fall, to kind of get back up and running. In September, we started having, being able to have some trials. Now, the civil side only has 6-person juries, but if you think about it, for a 12-person jury, let's say a murder case, you need 12 jurors, but you need 4 alternates. So you're talking 16 people, and who should be, a distance apart. Initially, it was 6 feet apart, which is why they used Lombardos for a couple of months because they had a big hall. But after that, they reduced the size. I think the distance about 3 feet apart. And so we had our first murder trial in October, a case out of Quincy, the Legion Post, where a young person was in a fight, and that was successfully tried. And we just tried in last month, we just tried a Needham case, a murder case. And that's, we get about 8 to 12 murders a year. And so that seems to be holding steady even through COVID. And so we're moving along pretty good. And all of a sudden, bang, Omicron comes. And so they announced just this week, or they announced last week, that they'll be closing the trial session down until January 28th. And we're hoping maybe we get through that back to trials, because not only do we have approximately 20 murder cases backed up, but we have a lot of serious cases, particularly in the Superior Court. So the court is still going to continue to provide services. Some of it may go remotely. And you know how the legislature even struggles at times. It's not the same being in there, talking to your colleagues face to face. The courts are the same way. Having lawyers meet face to face often is important, especially trying to hash things out. But the court has always stayed open, even if you needed a restraining order. Even during the beginning of COVID, when they pretty much closed the courts down for a month or 2, you could still walk into the Brookline Police Department and they would hook you up with a judge and they would get you a restraining order to keep you safe. So we found ways around it. I would tell you, I would give the court system probably a D or an F in their technology management systems, but they have improved a little. I think it's something that we have to focus on. I think we've learned some good lessons out of it. There are some times now that, maybe it's not necessary to tie someone up in court. And you and I normally would be sitting in a studio doing this interview and talking face to face. And that's not the case now.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and think through. There was a recent Globe article on warrant dismissal, and maybe you can sort of bring us up to speed on what the issue is and what work your office has been able to do, and maybe what the next steps look like.
Well, there's a whole bunch of, you go into the Brookline District Court, there's a bunch of old warrants kicking around. And the best example you and I talk about, I guess we're old enough that we can remember Bradley's. And there are other places that no longer exist, or we can't prove cases, but there's still a drawer full of warrants that people, if you sometime get stopped and they ran your name in the warrant management system and they found out that you had an outstanding warrant, and maybe it had to do with shoplifting at Bradley's, maybe it had to do with you forging checks or some larceny by check, larceny by trick. Well, Bradley's doesn't exist. And so our chances of ever proving a case like that are non-existent. So instead of trying to get people jammed up, we're spending some of our resources, and we have people going in, by hand, of course, because the computer system in the court system is a little tired and old, but we're going through and we're trying to dismiss some of these older cases where we know we can't prove these cases. So you just don't want someone jammed up with something that needlessly it's been kicking around for years and years. So it's relatively easy to do. It's just time consuming. So we have devoted the resources, and Brookline's one of the first courts we've gone to do that because we think that's important. And that really kind of leads into one of the other things that you've helped me out with. And, this is obviously getting rid of warrants, but expungement of people's crimes. This is a form of expungement because we're getting rid of the warrant. But we also, the legislature, when they passed criminal justice reform, they they passed a provision to allow for expungement of certain crimes. And those crimes essentially were non-violent crimes that are now no longer even a crime. So small amounts of marijuana, being the possession of a hypodermic needle, or being in the presence of heroin, things like that, that may have been crimes years ago that people look differently at those crimes, may have had convictions on their records that just doesn't make any sense in today's day and age. We tried to clear up some people's records. We trained probation officers, court officials, DAs. We were the first ones to run a training session of any counties in the state, and led the way on that. But we were finding that it was hard to reach people, was number one. And the second one is that it was so narrowly drafted that, let's say you're out at Gillette Stadium, and that happens a lot, Country Fest, a Patriots game. Let's say that you're minor in possession of alcohol, or you had small amounts of marijuana, and you were drunk and disorderly, and breaking the peace. So there's a single incident which had a marijuana charge, and so the legislature at the end of 2020 actually corrected that to allow multiple charges to be considered as a single event. And we think that will broaden our ability to help clean up some people's records, because as you know, especially young people, it can affect your ability to get in the military. It can affect educational opportunities, maybe even sometimes union opportunities, housing. So there's a whole bunch of things that can hurt someone when they're trying to get their life started and get on the path of being a good citizen. So we have spent a lot of time. We're going to try something else. We're working on another proposal, which maybe we'll do another show on that. It's going to take me a couple more weeks to put it together to broaden it. But you were one of the people in the legislature that helped with that effort. You understood that just getting rid of the marijuana charge, you wanted to get rid of the whole event. And so, that was included language that I had submitted to some of the county delegation. You guys made sure that it was put in the final version when the governor signed it in Chapter 253 of the Acts of 2020. So we're moving in the right direction, I think. That's important.
And the idea, right? The idea is if there's an interaction with a police officer involving a crime or what appears to be a crime, very often it's more than one thing at the same time, right? It's, as you
Absolutely.
said, it's like possession of a controlled substance, but also mouthing off to the police officer. And I'm not advocating for it, I'm not excusing it, but maybe you don't put your hands behind your back the first time the police officer
Sure.
says it, right?
Sure.
And
Right.
it's a stressful circumstance, and it's stressful for everybody involved, and it's easy to make one mistake after another. And at the end of the day, what did the person do? They had a bad day. They weren't their best selves, but they didn't hurt anybody. And
Right.
this
Exactly.
is not the thing that should, hang around their neck or
Wasn't
weigh them
enough just
down
to get
the
rid of
rest of
it.
their life. But
Absolutely.
the problem was the first time we did it, we would allow you to get rid of one of the charges, but not the other ones. So it didn't solve the problem the way we thought it would. And
No, but that happens. I mean, as you know, I spent a good number of years in the legislature, and as well-intentioned as the legislature can be, sometimes they get it right and sometimes they got to fix things. And I think that they recognize this was a problem. And they also recognized, talking to people like you and others, that we can do a better job in this area. And so I think this is something that we're going to continue to work on and correct, because it's important that clean people's records up. I mean, it gets into the bigger issue really of incarceration in Massachusetts and our state prison system. When I took office 11 years ago, the state prison population was close to 12,000. And then about 2 or 3 months ago, I actually was at a meeting with the Commissioner of Correction. We were at 6,300. I would think we're under 6,000 in the state prison system. And when you really look at the fact, Massachusetts, we were number 47 in rate of incarceration. And that was like 130 people per 100,000. Places like Alabama, Texas, and others were 600-700 per 100,000. The average in the United States was 440 people per 100,000. So we were initially 47. We dropped to number 50. Nobody's lower than us. We're even lower than Canada. Canada, I think, was like 138 per 100,000. So I guess I would tell you that police and prosecutors and others are putting the appropriate people in the state prison system. Sentences are appear to be becoming more reasonable as to what someone did. But when you finally look at today, who's in the state prison system, that we have 14% of the people are in the state prison system are there on a first degree murder, no parole, very violent crimes, very bad people. 27% of the people there are in a life sentence with the possibility of parole. That could be a murder, violent kidnapping, rape, things like that could possibly get you a life sentence. So there's 27% of the people. So 41% of the people are there with a life sentence. Only 14% are not eligible for parole. And then you take a look at the other end of the spectrum. There's about 1,200 people there that are primarily on a drug charge, a 94C charge. Now, that's their primary charge. But the Department of Corrections says that 75% of the people in the state prison system are violent people. And when you apply that to the drug offenders, that's also true, because we look at their records and we found out that over 75% of those people had a gun charge, a home invasion, a violent assault either concurrently or in the immediate past. And really what was funny, I know people say the non-violent drug offenders, well, the people we are putting in the state prison system are the traffickers and dealers. And on average, they had 43 arraignments per individual. So
that, on the one hand, it's like, that's terrible. On the other hand, it's good news. It's telling us that, when we think about, the war on drugs from the 80s and 90s, that Massachusetts no longer has that attitude of lock them all up, regardless of the offense, that we're actually using prison as a way to make sure we're protecting society from folks who are violent and helping folks who have made bad decisions, but nonviolent ones, other opportunities.
Nonviolent drug offenses, small amounts of marijuana don't even get prosecuted today. It's 50 pounds is trafficking weight. So that's a lot of marijuana. And you can have in your own home, you can grow 6 plants per individual, 12 per household. So, we've obviously changed the view of particularly marijuana, and so hasn't the DAs for years. Even I think before I got there, most people weren't prosecuting small amounts of marijuana. So, I think that changed, whether or not the legislature makes some changes, but I think society was forcing at least people like me anyway, to pay attention to where people were going. And not being a up to the ranks district attorney, I was not hard and fast married to the system. I ran a law firm before I got there, one of a good sized Boston law firm, and helped it grow from 3 people to, when I left, 35. They tell me they're much more successful since I left because there's 70 attorneys. But I now run the largest law firm in the county, and because of the people in the county who have allowed me to continue. But we focus on every county is different. You have obviously 11 different district attorneys, and I see my friends in Suffolk have already had 3 people shot, like the second day of the new year, someone killed. Well, the crimes there you might find out in Worcester or the Berkshires are clearly the Cape are different than Norfolk County. What kills people in Norfolk County are drug overdoses. So we do still pay attention to drug overdoses, particularly fentanyl. And the legislature actually changed the law to allow stronger penalties for people that are involved in fentanyl, which I applaud them for that. Actually, that's what's killing people. It's 100 times more powerful than heroin. So, that's something that we probably are a little bit more heavy-handed on when we find someone who's pushing fentanyl and versus some of the other drugs. So, and I think that's consistent with the votes in the legislature. So at the end of the day, that's one of the most important things that you as a legislator do, is decide the penalties for crime and punishment. And I take the oath of office that I follow the Constitution, I follow the state law. So the guidance of the legislature has been important in a lot of areas.
I want to take a step back. We missed an opportunity to talk about it earlier, and I don't want to miss it. Can you walk us through the difference between sealing a record and expunging it, and why that matters to folks?
Well, some people think that sealing a record is a wise thing to do. That you basically seal it up, but it's not like sealed so that some people can't get into it. So, and sometimes people are able to track the record down, and it shows that the record is sealed, which often can create more questions than answers. So you have to answer, why is your record sealed? So the record is kind of gone, but not gone, if that makes any sense. Expungement means see you later. This never happened. It is going to be completely wiped off the books. And it's just, there'll be no record of that past history in the system at all. So it's a simple, I mean, sometimes sealing a record may make some sense. There's some crimes that can't be expunged. You might want to consider, but you got to remember there could be some consequences to sealing the record, where expungement, there'll be no consequences because no one's going to know it's gone. There'll be no record of it. It's that simple.
And is there a process your office is going through now in thinking about expunging either things that are no longer crimes or helping sort of folks clean up their record? And how would they get involved in that? And how would folks who could benefit from this, how would they even know about it or work with you to help them out?
Well, that's one of the problems that we're having. The good work that the legislature has done and allowed us to continue is not really resonating. People aren't fully aware of it. Now, when we see something, we call it to the defendant's attention or their attorney. We have tried to educate people to take advantage of it. I do have a lawyer who's assigned this job to help people. So the courts can help you, but we can also help you with the paperwork, or we can take a look at your record and tell you whether or not you'll qualify or not. So I guess you can call the DA's office and ask for some help on expunging a record, and we'll try to give you the best advice we can give you. And or have your attorney call. So, but I think one of the things that some states are taking a broader approach to getting rid of records, and we're taking a look at what's being done in some of those states to see whether or not it is adaptable to Massachusetts. We kind of have a lengthy process for a pardon, per se. It has to go through the Board of Pardons, and then it has to go to the Governor's Council and the governor. It's a lengthy statutory process, but we're hoping that maybe we can work something out that makes some sense to have a broader dispensation, make some of these records disappear quicker. So that's something that we're working on now, and we hope to have an idea. It may need legislative help, and you'll be getting a phone call if that's the case. So I know that you'll be willing to help. You've helped in the past.
Well, I'll never miss an opportunity. That's the phone number that District Attorney Morrissey calls me at, and that's the phone number you can call me at, 617-872-8921. It rings this phone, and I know how to turn my ringer off. My ringer's off right now because we're recording a show. But I'm always happy to get those calls and to call you back. We've just got a few minutes left, and there was one thing that you had mentioned, fentanyl, and obviously while opioid overdose deaths are somewhat down, there's still a long way to go. Can you tell us a little bit about your office's sort of interaction with Narcan and helping prevent folks who are addicted, who might overdose, helping make sure they've got another chance?
Well, the first thing is, it didn't take me long to learn. And I think the former district attorney, now Congressman Keating, said that, hey, this is going to be a problem. And the opiate crisis, and I see my friend, the Attorney General, is taking on the Sacklers and Big Pharma, which is appreciated. They were given out, basically, if you took a look at the chemical makeup of some of the opioids, it was basically heroin. And so it was causing significant overdoses. It started my first year like in the 40s. And then by 2016, it hit 172 or 3 people. Those are what we refer to as unattended deaths, where the state and local police have to show up to determine whether or not it's an accident or a homicide. And now there are other people who may have died, Brookline residents or Quincy residents outside of Brookline and Quincy, and we wouldn't necessarily have those numbers. So, for tracking purposes, that's what we use. Now, the high was in the 170s, and we've got it down now just around 100. During COVID, we've had a little bit of a bump up this year. I think some mental health issues are driving it a little, but I think we're going to finish the year. I don't have the totals for this year, but it's going to be hanging around 110, 112, right around that number, which is down significantly over the last 5 years. And one of the big reasons is that most people get their experience with an opioid out of your own medicine cabinet, and people were able to have much easier access. We've obviously tightened that up with the medical community and the pharmacies. But if you have a loved one who's struggling, you want to make sure that you learn how to use Narcan and naloxone. Now, naloxone is the drug's name. Narcan is the name that DuPont gives to naloxone. And it's a very simple thing to use. Quincy Police had a pilot program 11, 12 years ago, and they were saving people left and right. And we said, gee, why wait? So we brought Dr. Muse, ironically, Danny Muse grew up in Brookline. And I refer to him as the unpaid consultant to the medical consultant, the DA's office. And he helped us distribute and train and get Narcan out to every police department in the county. Now, most of the fire departments run the ambulance service or the private ambulance services all had Narcan, but the police didn't. And sometimes the police are there. I'm sure the same is true in Brookline and Quincy. It's probably a 50-50 who gets there first, the police or fire. And so you want whoever it is to be able to help. And then we also remove some of the barriers for people to be able to get Narcan over the counter at a pharmacy. So, take away the prescription aspect of it because it's a life-saving drug. And as Dr. Muse said, you can take a bath in the stuff and it won't kill you. So it was something that we pushed hard, and we still continue to work with some of our partners, the medical communities and the pharmacies to keep that message out there. So I think that program, we took some drug money, that forfeiture money. We bought thousands of doses of Narcan. We distributed to the police departments, and that got us off the ground. And also, one of the things we want to remind people is the Brookline Police Department has a take back box right in the lobby of the police station, where if you have opioids or pain medication and you want to get rid of it, no questions asked, either just dump them in a plastic bag, pull off the label, throw the thing in, that they will dispose of that for you. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds of drugs off of the streets and out of the hands of particularly young children and many of our relatives. So that's been really our focus. Education and prevention is really one of the biggest focuses of the district attorney's office.
DA Morrissey, I know you're involved in so many different things in our county and in the town of Brookline, and I want to thank you for being so active and really working to transform your office from, being in the business of locking people up to being in the business of helping people who need help. And I think you've done a great job, and I'm so thankful for that. Folks, you've been watching Brookline Interactive Group, and thanks for watching. DA Morrissey, say goodbye, and we're gonna see you next week.
Thanks a lot. Have a happy new year.